Hello, and how are you? My name is Winnie and welcome to our session on cell biology. And by cell biology, it's the same as saying cytology, which is the study of cells and its function. So if you're new here, remember to subscribe. And just to remind also, this is a channel that focuses on lessons, lectures, and sessions pertaining to healthcare. And if this is your area of interest, kindly remember to subscribe, share with your friends, comment, and give us a like if you like our sessions and videos. So in these sessions, we are going to look more into the cell, its structure, its organelles, and the different functions that they play in the body. So stay with me all the way till the end. And so in these lessons, we are going to check on the cell, on the cell organelles. And before we go further, I want us to look at the cell organelles and how they are organized in the cell. It is interesting how the cell itself and its organization is so unique that it relates to each and every function, starting from the core business all the way as we head out into the cell membrane. So I just want to show you a unique arrangement that the cell has done and that it will guide us even as we are learning the different organelles and their functions. We know that the central part of the cell has the nucleus, and in the nucleus there is the composition of the DNA materials, which is mostly coined into the chromatins. And the chromatin is the main core of the DNA that will later on open up and replicate and do all the processes that pertaining to production of the hereditary characteristics. And the chromatin is stored in a place we call the nucleolus. And this now together gives us the nucleus, which is covered by the nuclear envelope here. So being that the nucleus is the central part for the DNA functions and all that, it's known that as you move outside, the the cell itself has put in a way that it will be based on the functions of each organelle. So when you move out, the immediate organelle that you see here is actually the rough endoplasmic reticulum. And if you all know, the rough endoplasmic reticulum is actually the organelle that focuses on protein synthesis. And the protein synthesis is actually one of the, protein itself is actually one of, protein contains RNAs and DNAs, and the ribosomes which contain or are contained on the rough endoplasmic reticulum also help facilitate this process of protein synthesis. So you can see when you have the DNA materials being replicated in the nucleolus, and now we have proteins needed to be synthesized, then this can be facilitated by the rough endoplasmic reticulum. And this is quite important because it's continues with the process of packaging and transportation, which is later on being facilitated by the smooth endoplasmic reticulum thereafter. So the smooth endoplasmic reticulum is here. The rough endoplasmic reticulum is here together with the ribosomes. And if you check closely, also we have the Golgi apparatus, which can actually check on the status of the materials and destroy if there's any abnormal ones before they can be packaged and transported to the various areas. We also got the mitochondria here, which is very key in providing energy. And then we have the centrioles that will later on help with the division of the cells by forming the microtubules and microfilaments. We have vacuoles, very key elements for transportation, and the lysosomes are very important for the lytic enzyme to just kill any harmful materials or destroy any tired or worn out cells. So this order here is very important, and you'll even see. So the foremost of all the organelle is the cell membrane, which is also known as the plasma membrane. So the cell membrane on our cell here is actually the covering that covers or surrounds the cytoplasm. And the cell membrane by description is said to be by by layer, meaning it has two layers being brought together, so it's bilayered. But before we go into the nature and the description about the bilayer, it's us to know first that the cell membrane is ultra thin, it is also dynamic, and it is electrically charged, hence has some selective permeable characteristic aspect, that is now it's a selective permeable layer that is able to separate the cytoplasm from the extracellular matrix. So here on our diagram, the cell membrane is the one surrounding all this content together with the cytoplasm and the organelles, but by nature it is bilayer, it is ultra thin, it is electrically charged, and then at the end of the day it is semi-permeable, meaning it does not allow each and every materials to pass here, but rather it allows some and does not allow others to pass through. And we've mentioned that the cell membrane is bilayered, meaning it has two layers. So we have two phospholipid layers that are made on both sides, so they combine to give us the bilayer nature here, like you can see. So I want to point on the red side. So you have one of the layer here and the second layer here, and we'll go more into describing it, that the cell membrane actually also has plasma and lipids on it that later on helps us to do various functions like reception. It allows transportation and all that. But on this bilayer, it's mainly made of phospholipid, and it's being said that the phospholipids have a head and a tail, and the head is hydrophilic and the tail is hydrophobic. But I just want to use this diagram for the introduction purpose without going into the details yet, because we will go into more details to describe the phospholipid status and the characteristics. So by structure description, the cell membrane has a phospholipid layer and it is semi-permeable. Phospholipid layer means it has lipids and that has phosphate in it. And the function of our plasma membrane is to control the entry and exit of materials in and out of the cell, and it also helps in surrounding the cytoplasm. So here, while I was mentioning, is that it is bi-layered, meaning it has two layers of phospholipid layer, and these phospholipid layers are now in two sides. So we have the outer face here, and then we have the inner face. So these layers are the ones that come together. And to recap, we're saying the phospholipid layer has two sides. It has the hydrophilic head and it has the hydrophobic tail. And we'll see how later this is organized. So these are two phospholipid layers that come together to give us what we are calling the bilayer. And being a bilayer, it contains on it, on the cell now, it contains special components, and that is the lipids and the proteins, and these carry different functions on our cell membrane. So here, example of the proteins, we have what we call the integral proteins, and we have what we call also the peripheral proteins. Then we have the lipids here in form of the cholesterols. There's some glycoproteins here. All these are doing different functions. But like I said, we will come later to describe this. For now, let's just look on the structure, that this cell membrane is bilayered, having two phospholipid layers that are bound together to give us the double membrane, and that is double phospholipid layer, which is semi-permeable and selectively allows entry and exit of materials in and out of the cell, and at the same time is able to surround the cytoplasm. So moving on, like I have promised, that we're going to look at the different lipids and proteins on the cell membrane. So the cell membrane is bilayered. It's made of phospholipids, and these phospholipids have different functions. So as you can see on this cell membrane, I've tried to expound it so that you can see the different aspects of it. So we have said it has a head and a tail, which you have hydrophilic and hydrophobic nature. So the head is stated to be hydrophilic. I mean hydrophilic, sorry, meaning does not react with water, so it can face the cytoplasm side. And then we have the hydrophilic side, that is the tail, which can't interact with water, so it can easily react, and for that side it faces away from the cytoplasmic area. So here are the different compounds. So there's oligosaccharides here. These are simply telling you they are carbohydrates. And then we have the glycoproteins, we have the phospholipids and sphingolipids, there are cholesterol inside here, we have glycolipids, there's some other integrated or integral proteins, the other peripheral proteins there, and the phospholipids, alpha helixes, these are also proteins. And so with these materials being part of the cell membrane, it means they have functions and they have roles that they play. So what do they do? What are they? And why are they on the cell membrane actually? Starting with the lipids, we've said the lipids are rare and of different types. We have phospholipids, okay? We have cholesterol and all that. So let's start with the phospholipids, which are actually the lipids part of the of the cell membrane. So we're being told the phospholipids is the major component of the cell membrane because it is the one that gives us a bilayer state. And by description, we are being told that the phospholipids have two sides. Because it's bilayered, it has two sides. It has the the hydrophilic side, and then it has the hydrophobic side here. So the hydrophilic side is said to be the water-loving side. It is attracted to water. Therefore, it will be facing the side of the cytoplasm, or it will be interacting with the cytosol and the extracellular fluid. While the side that is hydrophobic is actually the tail, and we're being told this is fears water or repels water, and therefore it will face away from the cytosol or the extracellular fluid. So the bilipid nature is what actually contributes to the semi-permeability of our cell membrane. So let's first describe how the phospholipids look like. So the phospholipids are said to be lipids that have phosphorus or phosphates, and for this case lipids are components that have glycerol and fatty acids. If you've not watched our video on the organic biochemistry, we've discussed a whole class on lipids, so you can go ahead and check on it. And on the lipids, we say the lipid normally has glycerol and fatty acids, and for this is what we have here. There's a glycerol and a fatty acid, but again we are saying for something to be a phospholipid, then it needs to contain phosphorus. So here is our phosphoric acid branch. So this together gives us the phospholipid. But now the phospholipid has two sides. It has a head and it has a tail. And we are saying the head is hydrophilic, meaning it likes water. It does not repel our water. So because it is water loving, therefore the head is the side that will be facing the cytoplasmic side and the extracellular side. However, we are told the tail is hydrophobic, meaning it fears water. So because of this aspect that it fears or repels water, it then faces the other side of the cytoplasm. It does not face the cytoplasm. Reason being, if it does so, it might react or cause some chemical reaction that can damage the cell membrane. So that's how the phospholipids are. They have a head and a tail, and the head is hydrophilic and the tail is hydrophobic. But the phospholipids are the major components of the cell membrane. They give the cell membrane the bilayer characteristics that contribute to the semi-permeable state of the cell membrane. And so here are more on the phospholipids. So we are saying it has two polar sides, the hydrophilic and the hydrophobic state. And these two sides interact with water. So what we mean by head and tail is this. So this is our head, and this here in the yellow is the tail. And because the head is the one that is hydrophilic or likes water, therefore it can interact with the extracellular side and it can interact with the cytoplasm. So with the tails, they'll therefore be in the middle here. They won't be facing any cytoplasm or extracellular fluids because they might react with them. So here the bilayer state. So we have the outer face and the inner side. So the inner face is the one that will be facing the cytoplasm or the head side. So this is our heads. So these head sides are the ones that are going to be facing the fluid sides, that is extracellular and the intracellular or the cytoplasm side. So the heads are hydrophilic and the tails are hydrophobic. So moving on, more on the lipids. So other lipids that we have on the cell membrane are the cholesterols, and we are told the cholesterols are selectively dispersed between the membrane phospholipids, and the main aspect for this is to help keep the cell membrane from becoming stiff and preventing these phospholipids from closely packing together. So if you see, the cholesterols are dispersed across the bilayer, and the main agenda for this is to give the cell membrane that jelly characteristics where it does not pack itself together or doesn't become stiff. But again, it prevents, like here being said, that it prevents the phospholipids from being closely packed together. And the other type of lipids on the cell membranes are the glycolipids. So the glycolipids are located on the cell membrane surface and they have a carbohydrate attached to it. So what they do is they help the cell to recognize other cells on the body. In short, they act as receptors. So here are glycolipids. So this is glycolipids, and from the word glyco, that tells you it's a glycogen. And glycogen, these are complex types of carbohydrates. So being a glycolipid, it therefore means it has carbohydrates, but it also has a lipid in it. And because it is located on the surface of the cell membrane, they act as receptors or they act as signals. So they can signal or they can detect other cells around the body. And so the other materials that you'll find on the cell membrane are the proteins. And the proteins on the cell membrane have different functions and purpose, but they are categorized into two main proteins. We have peripheral membrane proteins, and then we have integral membrane proteins. So the peripheral membrane proteins by descriptions are said to be found exterior to the cell membrane. They are not mainly like attached to the cell membrane. They're just exterior to the cell membrane, but they are connected to the membrane while interacting with other proteins. So for example, here we have our peripheral protein membrane, and it is attaching to the cell membrane through our integral cell membrane proteins. So they interact with the cell membrane using other integral proteins. Then we have the integral membrane proteins, which are told to be directly inserted into the cell membrane, and most of them actually pass across the cell membrane. So for example, here we have an integral cell membrane, the whole of this. It has been integrated into the cell membrane and it is a main part and parcel of the cell membrane, and it can literally just cut across. So this integral membrane actually are the majority, and they have so many different functions. Part of it is transportation, part of it is signaling and communication. But to just begin on these proteins, we have two main categories, and that is peripheral and the integral cell membranes. And so on the cell membrane, we will find the different types of proteins, and these different types of proteins can be of different nature. We have here, for example, here are all the purple ones. I hope you can see the purple materials or the purple components. All these are proteins. And so we have receptor proteins here whose main role is to signal. Then we have the channel proteins, which are said to be always open. They do not have to be stimulated to open to allow materials to pass across. And then we have the gated channel proteins, which are normally closed. And I hope you can see the gate down here. So this is the gate that has to be open to allow materials in and out. And then we have the transporter proteins that allow materials to transport. And this is the one that actually facilitate active transport and also facilitates facilitated diffusion. And you have glycoproteins, and the glycoproteins from the word glyco. This is from the word glycogen, which refers to carbohydrates. And if you remind us, glycoproteins are complex nature of carbohydrates. So the glycoproteins, they work together to do signaling and channel communications. As you can see here, we have the carbohydrates group, and they are all spread out to allow signaling. So these proteins are normally spread out across the cell membranes, and they will allow us to manage different functions of the cell membrane, be it semi-permeability, transportation, or just linking the cell membrane to other cells. And here we have two environments. We have the extracellular environment, and then we have the cytoplasm, and our materials will be moving across this cell membrane. And to just bring us to board again, we have the yellow substances here, which works together with our proteins, and these yellow substances are the cholesterols. And these cholesterols, just to recap on them, their main agenda is to prevent the bilayer from packing itself into each other, but also the main work is to allow the cell membrane to have a jelly-like characteristic so that it is jelly-like and it's not stiff. So these are all the proteins, and we will go on to next to just see their different functions and how they work. And so looking on to the different proteins and their functions, so we've mentioned all these proteins. So the first protein is the structural proteins, and you're told the structural proteins, the main agenda is to help give the cell its support and shape. So it's mainly for cell support and stability. Then the second category of protein is the receptor protein, and the receptor protein is said to help the cell membrane communicate with the external environment. So you can use the receptor proteins through helpers of other chemicals like the hormones, the neurotransmitters, and or in any other signaling molecules. So that's how the receptor proteins work. Then we have the channel of the transport proteins. These come in form of globular proteins, and they help transport molecules across the cell membrane using different uh, cell membrane transporters or transportation mechanisms like facilitated diffusion. And lastly, on the proteins, we have the glycoproteins. So the glycoproteins, they have a carbohydrate on it, just like the word glyco, which means carbohydrates. So they are attached to them, and they're embedded in the cell membrane, and the main purpose is to help the cell to communicate. So they help in cell-to-cell communication. They also transport materials across the cell membrane. So the proteins are many, and they have different functions, like you could see on the cell membrane there, from channel transporters to receptor proteins to glycoproteins to structural and all that. But the functions is to just being able to facilitate the cell membrane to do their work effectively. So thank you so much for staying with us to the end. And if this is the content that you like, remember to subscribe, leave us a comment, let us hear what you think about our work, and like our videos. Share with your friends. Until then, see you and bye bye.